And welcome everybody to the PCS Like a Pro show. I'm your host, Megan Harless, as always. And we've got a great show for you today because we're into PCS season 2022 and everybody wants to know what the season is going to be like. So we're going to be talking with a few folks from the International Association of Movers about what it is that you need to know to prepare for this season. But before we get into that, I just want to remind everybody that you have hard orders and you're sitting on them or you're expecting your orders any day. You need to get your move set up in DPS as soon as you have your orders. Don't sit and wait and think, we'll wait 4 weeks out, we'll book them then, we'll book when it gets closer. Start setting your move up in DPS as soon as you have those official orders. There's a lot of places that we're seeing right now that are booked solid through June, and we're booking into mid to late July already. So if you've got a move coming up, make sure that you go ahead and get that set up on DPS. So we're going to dive right into today. Like I said, we got some folks here from the International Association of Movers. If you just take a minute, and Dan, you tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Dan Bradley. I am the Director of Government and Military Relations at the International Association of Movers. I was a 20-year Air Force Logistics Readiness Officer, Transportation and Logistics Readiness, and an 8-year Department of the Army civilian. Also, I guess they called it, I was a traffic management supervisor while I was as a civilian there. So, and I did 3 years as my last 3 years in the military was as the DoD's Director of Personal Property. And now I've been here with OInn for almost 4 years now.
Awesome. And also, Chuck White, can you tell us a little bit about yourself as well?
Sure. I am the president of the International Association, have been the president for about 3.5 years, but I've been with the association for almost 18 years. I hate saying all this because everybody starts adding up these numbers and figuring out, my God, that's an old man. But for 11 years before that, I worked as football coach. So, and by the way, I am an Army brat. Go Army. And so I get it. Let me see, 8 different schools through the time I got to high school. So Megan, I know you've got an 8th grader that's graduating or just has graduated and is ready for high school. So you are a special mom. Your timing is perfect because you're allowing your son to make the move and then get into high school, and hopefully he'll have most of his high school career in the same location. So God bless you. So anyway, that's me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'll be school number 7 for him when he starts in the fall as a freshman. So we were very fortunate that that's how our timeline kind of lined up for him. My other 2 will still middle of elementary school and middle of middle school is what they'll have to deal with, but it's a common thing for us. So let's dive right into today because these are the questions everybody wants to know. And the first one is going to be kind of a loaded question. Hoping you all have your crystal ball out. What is this season projected to look like?
Go ahead, Dan. you saw this one.
I think it's projected to look a lot like last year, unfortunately, I think in a lot of ways, right? So, and again, if you didn't PCS last year, then maybe that doesn't mean anything to you. But there are capacity constraints, there are labor constraints. There's a couple of things this year that we didn't have last year, right? Which is significant increases in inflation and significant increases in fuel prices, and all of those things have an impact. Again, not just in the moving market, but in any kind of logistical process, right? Where any type of goods, freight or otherwise, but household goods certainly are being shipped from one location to another. Rail is constrained, trucking is constrained, ocean carriers are constrained for those overseas shipments. So things are very interesting right now. I think those are last year, there was, as you're aware, Megan, there were a number of issues with shipments where just the logistics network got bogged down and there weren't a lot of things that people could do about it. Things were stacked up at various ports trying to move in one direction or another. Things were stuck trying to get onto rail to move across the country. Trucking is a constraint and was a constraint. And so there were delays last year, significant number of delays. There were what is it called, turn back shipments that, you just talked about booking your shipment as soon as possible, getting into DPS and doing that as soon as possible. And all that's absolutely true. But there were people who did all that. And at the time of execution, where movers thought that they were going to have a crew and a truck ready to go, and those things disappeared on them kind of overnight, and shipments had to be turned back and be rebooked again and start the process again. So that was painful. It was painful for the members, and certainly for the GIPSOs, the personal property shipping offices, trying to manage that, and Transcom trying to manage the whole program. Painful as well for the movers, because they didn't want to have to do that either. So hopefully, it's not as bad this year in that. I'm just saying that all those same elements still exist. I think we said it last year. If you go into, I go into Walmart every once in a while and look on the shelves, and some of them are kind of empty. It's the same problem that you're having there. That anywhere I'm trying to get my lawnmower, an oil change on my lawnmower, and get it serviced, and it's 4 weeks out. You know what I mean? Like, it's just the people aren't there from a labor perspective. The equipment's not there, to service it, and everything's taking longer. And so, that's a lot of doom and gloom, I guess. I think they try to put things into place to try and help with that situation, right? People aren't just sitting on their hands, I don't think, on the government side or on the industry side, looking at what happened last year and trying to make adjustments. But I don't know if Chuck has any comments on that, but we, like I said, people are trying to make efforts to not have those same situations. But what that really could mean in a lot of ways is, and you already talked about it, blackouts, right? People are starting to say, well, I don't want to run into the situation I ran into last year and have to turn back shipments. Therefore, I have to be more aggressive in blacking out and not accepting shipments that the DoD wants me to move.
I'd agree with everything that Dan said. I think the primary issue for us right now, the Great Resignation took place. We are, as an industry, still trying to recover on the labor side. Driver shortages are a reality and have been a reality for quite some time. But just the regular day-to-day laborer that will walk into your house to handle the packing and the loading side of your shipment, we are down 15 to 20% on the labor side, is what we understand. And so the constraints are real. And I'm concerned that we are hearing about these constraints now in mid-May, where we typically start hearing these things in mid-June, late June. But we're already hearing, and we were on a conference call with U.S. Transportation Command, U.S. Transcom, a week ago. And one of the GIPSOs, GIPSO North Central, located in Colorado Springs, indicated that they had 50 shipments already that they just couldn't get booked. I'm worried that there's going to be a lot of actual cost reimbursement, almost not a requirement, but request for many people to explore PPMs and that possibility. No fault of the service member, and really, I would say no fault of the industry, in that we'd love to move your shipments. We'd love to have enough personnel to be able to handle it. But DOD has hammered into us, if you do not have the capacity, the capability to handle a shipment properly, appropriately, then don't take it. Well, more and more people are saying, crying uncle. And so there's going to have to be other outlets. The one word that I would say is, we always say communication, but flexibility, I think, is going. I understand the requirements, the report dates, et cetera, but be as flexible as you possibly can, because things are likely to change. They hopefully, if they're changing, they're shifting a day or two one direction. But if you're flexible, then, and you're not locked into getting out of residence, reporting dates, et cetera, or doing this early enough that you can have that flexibility, I think is a real key.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's something we say a lot when you set up your move and you plan your move, to have a few days of flexibility in there in case your dates need to shift for one reason or another. I mean, in the perfect world, we'd like everything to line up how it is. But I mean, besides the delays and shortages that we have, I mean, normal everyday things kind of happen too. Sometimes a truck breaks down that nobody expects, a mover gets sick that nobody expects. So your crews might be shorter one way or another, and they may need an extra day to be able to get your stuff packed up. So being able to have a couple days of flexibility built into your schedule is always a good idea. We've got a question here from Jen that I want to ask you guys about. And if anybody else is watching, you've got questions about this season or what to expect, please drop them in the comments and we'll ask what we can. The first, I want to break this up into two pieces. Are you guys aware of what the Army brownout is that's happening in August to November at all?
No.
I've been told about that. Okay, so breaking news for you.
All right.
That's why we come here.
The Army is transitioning from one system to another system. The IPSET, they're transitioning to the IPSET A system, which is supposed to be used for like pay and personnel management and such. And so during this time frame of August to November, they are limiting the number of soldiers and their families that are moving. So basically only those that have an event-driven PCS. So if you're going to a schoolhouse, if you're retiring, if you're separating, if you are on a hardship tour or some medical issue comes up and you have to curtail your location for whatever reason, it's all event-driven PCSs will be allowed to continue, but everybody else is going to kind of be put on hold until an October-November timeframe and then they'll let everybody else PCS as they transition from this one system to the next system. So knowing that now, is that going to impact any of the delays that we're seeing? Will any of the delays that happened over the summer clear up by that October-November timeframe, to where those families that are moving then kind of don't feel that summer peak season delay?
Well, I would say real quickly, yes. My fear is that those folks will want to get out the door earlier rather than waiting till the November, December timeframe. And then that will push more people into what we would call the peak of the peak season. And that scares me a bit. One of the targets that DO, go ahead.
Really quick to clear up something that in
Okay.
there. So families that already have their orders issued are not changing. If they have an RFO, which the Army calls a request for orders, those are changing. If you're expected to PCS in that time frame and you do not have official orders yet, those orders will not get issued. And when they do, it'll have a report date after the brownout is over.
Gotcha. Well, I would think I think those families will probably have a bit better experience than they would normally, because you don't have that huge peak season and peak season hangover that's resulting from people kind of continue to be pushed to the right. If there's that break there, then I do believe you won't have that massive number of people that were moving. The other services won't be coming into play probably as much because they're not going through the same thing. I think for people that are affected by this and pushed right a bit, I think it might be a better experience because the volumes won't be nearly as great.
Yeah, and I would just add, and the Army's the big dog, right? So in terms of a number of movements, so if they are backing off a little bit for a couple of months, as Chuck says, I think that helps with capacity to some extent. Typically, August, you're starting to come down off of that peak, and so if you're still moving in that time frame after that, normally I would say that's better, and that's something that we've talked about for a couple of years, to spread out moves, right? To make them, they're just better in the off season, typically from a customer satisfaction survey perspective. I will say last year, once we hit August and even September, a lot of the movers were like, hey, we're not seeing the downturn. It's still busy. There's things still going on based on the nature of what was happening over the last couple of years. And then the other part I would say is, the Army said to us in January when we started talking again about whether or not they could spread out moves. They, as the DoD, could spread out moves to kind of help the situation due to all the capacity constraints that were going on. They said, hey, look, our orders are kind of out there, as you mentioned, Megan, and our requirements are significant, and there's no way for us to spread them out right now. It's too late. They were telling us in January, it's too late right now. And they used the term, and I was a little surprised that there was a latent, capacity requirement there for people who hadn't moved during COVID, that things just have to happen and they can't wait any longer. So, we expected actually to see a little bit of higher move capacity this summer than in the or requirements this summer than in the past couple of years. So all those things I think will factor in. But certainly I think the further you move into the fall, the better things are. But again, we've seen constraint problems throughout the year, frankly, in terms of U.S. flag availability and ports being congested and all those types of things. So,
one of the negatives that just came to mind is I'm a little worried in terms of personnel that we might have available during that time of the year. Obviously, we're an incredibly seasonable industry. That seasonal effect, we bring on labor during the busiest season. That labor comes in a number of ways. Sometimes we get kids that are on break from college that may come in, and we utilize those to augment. There are a number of visa programs. There's one that's called the H-2B visa program, where we can bring in workers from overseas that are seasonal workers. A number of our businesses take advantage of that to plus up their workers during the busy season. Typically, kids are back at school, so college's excess labor is not available. Those H-2B programs typically end in the August, September timeframe, and those folks go back to their country of origin. So depending on what those numbers look like, as Dan said, Army's the big dog, and if this is a significant number, then I worry maybe a little bit about the personnel that we probably would have had previous to that, and may have fallen by the wayside during that time frame.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So in the end, don't be like me trying to move in the middle of June.
Yeah,
I
was going to mention that.
Right? But it sounds like moving later in the fall time frames generally does a little bit better. So with all of these delays and the shortages happening, do you guys see, again, in your crystal ball that you guys carry around everywhere, do you guys see any of these things ending in the future or the near future?
I'm worried. One of the things I'm very, very worried about. So we've got this curve of up and down happening, particularly on the international movement side. We've talked about the shortages and the shipping backlog and the port congestion that has resulted, and it has affected everyone's life. I think the last time I was on, I talked about my wife's looking for cat food in the grocery store. She's still looking for that cat food.
And now it's baby formula.
Oh, exactly. That kind of thing. And these are all, little pain points that we face. But with the uptick in COVID in China, where a ton of the manufacturing is coming, Shanghai, the city which has the largest port in the world, has seen a complete shutdown. And been reading periodical and the information coming out, and there are 500 ships waiting outside the harbor of Shanghai, waiting for picking up goods from China for onward movement to the rest of the world. When that opens back up, look out. And it's just not US, it's just not West Coast of US. This is the entire world. So many of the problems that were associated with port congestion, supply chain issues, that's just going to exacerbate it quite a bit. So I to answer your question, I don't see many of these issues going away. We've got a war in Ukraine. that has really, really impacted, as everybody knows when they drive their car up to that pump, the cost of fuel. The cost of fuel in Europe, we think we've got it bad here, $10 plus a gallon. And so that's a whole nother thing that we are starting to deal with now, because we have access to what we call a fuel surcharge here in CONUS, here in the United States. But the DOD, in their infinite wisdom, doesn't have anything like that in place, OCONUS. And so we are starting to see capacity issues OCONUS now as well, because those folks are saying, I just can't continue to do what I need to do without having some way to offset the cost of fuel. So we've been having a lot of discussions at the hierarchy at US Transcom about trying to find a way forward to supplement the cost of fuel for our industry folks overseas. But it hasn't happened at this point, and I'm very, very worried that we are going to have even more serious capacity issues outside the U.S.
Yeah, the fuel thing, that's a big thing that I think everybody has kind of been talking about, because even in our groups, we have a lot of discussions on right now our mileage rate that we're able to claim is 18 cents per mile, and how that doesn't cover very much. And so when I was doing for our own PCS, we're going just over 500 miles for our two vehicles. When I was averaging it at about $4 a gallon, it was going to be about $500 out of pocket that we would be paying for our PCS. And yesterday I went and got gas and it was $4.39. So we're going to be more than what I was already expecting in that. So I think not just the moving industry, but everybody across the board doing any type of heavy driving is going to be feeling at least that piece of the pain.
Yep.
Yeah. So every year we know some of the business rules change within the tender of service in the program. What are some of the changes this year that directly impact the customer?
I can probably list off a couple here. The one that's just happening, I don't know if you've heard about it or not, you probably did, Megan, is the gun safe weight allowance. So they just come out with a change to the joint travel regulation, which then Transcom and the personal property folks in the DoD have to make policy and rules for now, so that the movers understand how it works, and you guys as service members understand how it works. But they've just allowed people to move gun safes, but not have it count against their weight allowance. So that's one, and that came out of
500 pounds.
So it's a safe up to 500 pounds and a shipment weight not to exceed 18,000 pounds, right? Yeah. So those are kind of the two factors. But some of the things that are a little tough on that we're kind of waiting for how the policy is going to work is that the requirement in the JTR and the Joint Travel Regulation says must be weighed separately. And as you can imagine, trying to bring something to somebody's residence to weigh some 500 pounds separately is not going to be easy. So we're hoping that the policy will come out that you can use the manufacturer's weight. You know, you get the manufacturer make and model of a safe and say, okay, well, this costs, or this weighs, 400 pounds, and that's what goes on your inventory. But that's kind of one, and that came out of a safety initiative from the, out of Congress about suicides and the misuse of guns in the home and things like that, and trying to make it easier for service members to have a safe so that guns can be safe in their house and not have to worry about, hey, but if I buy this safe, it's going to cost me more now, or I'm going to have to pay out of pocket to move my stuff because I'm over my weight allowance. So I think that's good.
I will say when I saw that, I was very excited, and I texted my husband right away saying, hey, we should go upgrade our gun safe, because it's not going to count against our weight. And he's all team, let's wait until we move before we buy anything else, which I'm just like, but it's not going to count. And we'll have people that move it into our house for us. Like, it's not going to be you and our neighbor trying to maneuver this thing. But he's still team, let's wait until after we move.
I appreciate that caution.
Yeah, we have, I don't know, man. The movers like those safes. Tough to move, but man, let's throw that extra 500 pounds. Yeah. That's
I think he's trying to be nice, because we have a home gym in our garage, and so we already have an elliptical and a treadmill, and a weight pull-up bar thing and other stuff out there that they're going to have to maneuver down the stairs into our basement that we're making our home gym. So I think he's trying to, think like, let's not make them hate us right off the bat.
Hey, we are a business that makes its money based on weight. Come on, buy that heavy stuff. Let's buy another 310-pound weight set, Olympic weight set or something.
Yeah.
There's still so many questions about that for us. I mean, this was something that I think blindsided US Transcom. They didn't know it was coming. And so they're having to figure out exactly how that's going to roll into the current rules that they have in place. I mean, is it all safes? If I've got a big safe that I'm hiding my gold bullion in at my house, I know Megan's got so much money and gold bullion associated with her family. But if it's not technically a gun safe, but it's a safe I can put guns into for safekeeping, does that count? Because the regulation specifically speaks to gun safes. So, I mean, we're all for whatever, because we're all for safety in military homes. I'm all about that. But we just want to be sure we understand the rules around this new initiative.
Yeah. You want others? You want more?
Yeah, you have more?
I got a few that I could think of. So this is, again, impactful for the movers, impactful for the member in some ways, and you might see it as negative. Movers would see it as positive, but I think it's an expectation management issue. Transcom updated the transit times on how long companies have to get your goods from point A to point B. And, some of those updates were significant, but they did an analysis of how shipping had gone over the last couple of years and what the real, from A to B really was in the US and overseas internationally. And so I think they said domestically, they made some updates from 6 to 24 days, depending on where you are in the country and where you're going to. So again, it just kind of, I think, adds a bit of realism to something we've been talking about since I've been with the association for 4 years, but even beyond that, right, kind of post 9/11, with all the transit problems that came with security and getting into installations and all those kind of things that had impacts on how long it took for things, and the security issues at ports overseas and in the US, and all those delays that happened because things were put into place to try and make containers secure and those kind of things. So there was a pretty significant update. And then there are 18,000 channels, where they move stuff back and forth from that they catalog in the DoD program, I think, on the international side. And they updated the transit times on 7,000 of those channels. And those updates were anywhere from 1 day to 82 days, I think, on the very far extreme. And again, it's just, there are some places that we don't transit very much. Therefore, there's not a lot of traffic there. Therefore, it takes a long time for it to get a ship, get across the ocean, get out of a port and on. So while it looks, I think, on the customer side, like, oh, wow, they have longer to move my stuff. The stuff is taking that long. It doesn't really matter what the transit time is. It is what it is. People aren't holding on to your shipment just so they can hold on to it to meet a transit time. In this business, they don't get paid until they deliver your stuff. So, companies want that delivered as fast as possible. It just adds some realism, I think, into the process that a customer can look at it and say, okay, well, I have to make arrangements because I can't expect my stuff to get there until X date now based on the new transit time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we saw the Navy, and I'll go back and I'll find the link to get it dropped into the comments, but the Navy created this really good cross chart to be able to show those updated transit times, which when they posted it and we shared it into our networks, a lot of people really appreciated that, to be able to have that realistic expectation of how long it's going to take, so they know, do I need to pack an extra suitcase of seasonal clothing because it's going to seasons are going to change or whatever it may be. So I think a lot of people, even though I hate seeing that things take longer, it is what it is with that. But I think having that realistic expectation goes a long way to being able to help families plan and prepare for their PCS.
Yeah.
One of the things associated with that, Dan, is the 7-day spread on pickups that has been implemented into DPS. If people didn't move last summer, then they may or may not be aware of this 7-day spread expectation. I'll let Dan speak to that in just a second. but it's been flipped a little bit this summer versus how it was managed in 2021. And it's something folks should know. And once they set that expectation of the 7-day spread that they will be available, then if something happens and they want to change that spread, that's not something, it used to be that the movers could work for them. Now it's got to be handled through the transportation office. So if things change, don't just think you can call the mover and say, hey, are you available to move it this other time? They'll let you know, yay or nay, but that's got to be, the changes need to be handled through the transportation office specifically. Dan, can you speak to the difference between 7 days forward versus 7 days backward?
So the spread deals with when, as a customer, you have to be available to get your stuff packed and picked up, right? And so in a couple of years ago, there wasn't a spread at all. Here's the date determined specific in the system that says, here's your pack date, here's your pickup date, and that's the expectation. Again, we've talked about the industry talked about a spread, I think, for a while, although it was implemented without our knowledge really that it was coming. I mean, we knew when we saw the new business rules and had time to look at those, but it wasn't a specific ask at the time, although I think it had been an ask previous, years before that. But again, it's almost not relevant what happened last year, but this year, what the requirement is on the spread is that Transcom is you as a customer can say, hey, I have to have a pickup by this date. Like I can't go past this date that it has to be picked up. And so they put that in the system, count back 7 days, and now you have to be available as a customer anywhere in that 7-day window for your pickup. And frankly, the pack, if you choose, or if the mover chooses the first day in that window, then as a customer, you have to be available the immediate days preceding that for pack, right? So that could actually be outside the 7-day spread by a day or two, depending on how many days of pack that you have in there. So customers got to know that while they have a desired date that they get to put in the system, there is a range where that desired date falls into, and they have to be available for the mover to come during that time frame, anywhere in that 7-day time frame. But the TSP has a requirement, the mover has a requirement to let you know within 3 days of being awarded that shipment that, hey, here's our negotiated date between me and the customer that here's where I'll pack and here's where I'll pick up, and that's got to go in the system in a fairly short period of time. So, and as Chuck said, if somebody comes in, if the customer comes in later and says, hey, I know I had this 7-day window, I know the pack and pickup is scheduled here, but could I move it, outside that window because of things that have changed since this was awarded? The TSP can say, the mover can say, no, I can't do that. There's no capability. And I think at that point, it'll go back to the transportation office, and they can try and find another mover or tell you, hey, you need to stick in that time frame. If it's yes, if the mover says yes and the customer says yes, and then as Chuck said, then you got to go back to the transportation office and have it put into the system. And frankly, there could be a backlog of that happening. There's a lot of things going on in the summer that your transportation office is trying to stay up to date on in DPS and in the requirements. So things can get pretty backlogged in that requirement. But that's the 7-day spread window. It's important. And if there's, I don't know if there's any questions associated with that, but that's my quick explanation.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I can speak on that date change because that was actually our experience that we had put in when we set up our move on DPS, put in for 1 day as our last available pickup date as it's listed in DPS. And then in the process of waiting for our move to be assigned and finding a house, we found a house that's not available till July 1st, realized we didn't want to leave at the beginning of June because that'd be so much more time in a hotel for lodging. Plus our rent leaving is not prorated. It was prorated when we moved in, but it's not prorated moving out. So we're paying for the whole month of June, whether we're here or not. So it was like, why don't we just stay a couple weeks longer and then move? And so that's why our dates got pushed back 2 weeks. Once our movers got assigned, talked with them about it, they could handle it, had to contact our transportation office so they could get it changed and updated in the system as well. You said
to yourself, I'm moving in the peak, but let me see if I can move in the peak of the peak and back this up. Right?
Yeah, it's only the busiest week of the year.
Listen, I want to be that person that tests the industry on how well they do in the peak of
That's
the
good.
peak. And so it'll be a firsthand experience. It'll be, documented on my page with everybody. So we'll see exactly how the peak of the peak is either, not as bad as industry says, or just, it's worse than what they say. I think we'll find out. But, for our families, why not? Let's be those people.
Why not?
I'm just going to call Chuck. When I have an issue, I'm just going to call Chuck and Dan and be like, listen.
Yeah, great. Yeah, because I can just manufacture some capacity for you.
Right to voicemail.
Week of June.
Yeah, and they're going to be like blocking my number, blocking my email. Like, I don't know who this person is.
Who is that woman?
We went from June 9th to June 23rd as our last available pickup date. So, and then we're getting our keys July 1st, which goes right into 4th of July weekend, which means we probably won't have a delivery until the 5th or the 6th as the earliest. Still waiting on what that is, but why not? It's
You're going to Leavenworth. Is that where you're heading?
We are at Leavenworth. So if anybody knows anything about Leavenworth, there's a big schoolhouse there for the majors in the Army. We get some other branches that go there too, but it's a big schoolhouse. The Command General Staff College. So 1,200 families PCS out, and then 1,200 families PCS in within a 4 to 6 week period.
Very tight window. Yeah.
And so it's a very crazy, hectic, unique experience. If Leavenworth happens to be your first PCS, you can't base future experiences on it because it's just a unique experience of its own. But know you're not alone in whatever issues and things you face. Just ask your neighbor. They'll be there to help you because everybody kind of experiences what that craziness is.
You want more rules, Megan?
Well, we've got a question here in the comments I want to put up to ask you about from Samantha. She asked, what if we don't get a date within that 3-day window? They've been fighting for 6 weeks. They're less than a month out from their move, and the movers say they can't confirm our move dates, and there is no 3-day requirement.
I would go back to the transportation office and let them know. And there is a requirement there. I know that, and Chuck mentioned earlier that one of the personal property shipping offices, I think you said, Chuck, 50 that they couldn't control. I think they actually said 90 that they couldn't find movers for, right? So the numbers are growing, and I understand that movers are potentially struggling to get an agent on shipments like that to confirm a date. But the requirement is in the system. Whether or not what date they give you becomes something that they can actually manage. But it's time to highlight that, certainly, and maybe you already have, to the transportation office, because then people need to start reaching out to that TSP and finding out, exactly what's going on. Are they really going to handle the shipment? Are the constraints too much? Should it be pulled back and given to somebody else? And the mover doesn't want that to happen for a lot of reasons, but one of them is, they accepted the shipment, and if it does get pulled back, then that could be a mark against them. So that's not something that they're looking for. But I understand that constraint.
So in Samantha's question, she said 3-day window, and I'm not sure what she was referring to.
That's where, so when our shipment gets assigned to the TSP has 3 days to contact us to confirm it. So Samantha, gotcha. I see where you've talked about that you can't get a hold of somebody. Message the page, send me a message. I'll get some information for you and see if we can get you connected to the GIPSO or the service headquarters that you're affiliated with to help get you some resolution to your issue. So go ahead and send me that message, and we'll help get you the answers that you need for that, because you shouldn't be waiting. We can give you the regulation piece to that too, that you can go back and cite with your TSP as well.
Yeah, my apologies. I thought we were talking about the 7-day window for the spread. I thought that, but you're talking about the response after the assignment of the shipment. I got it. My apologies, Samantha.
To confirm what that date is.
100%.
So I want to throw this at you guys. A conversation that we've had many times before about air tags, tracking devices. Everyone has questions about them in the groups, and we're talking about business rules. Has there been any change, regulations, discussion about restricting families from utilizing them, or is it if families want to use it, they can go ahead and do what they want to do with it?
Yeah, no restrictions. If they would like to utilize that. Again, I think just for transparency for all, I think it doesn't, I'm hoping that it's not supposed to be a gotcha and that we see where you are. I mean, we as an industry have talked a lot about this transparency, about making sure that we're communicating and updating members where their truck is, when to be expecting delivery, et cetera. I do think that it is well within the rights of military members to utilize the tags. There's no law or requirement or regulation that would stop that. Again, for transparency's sake, I'd encourage them to let drivers know. I mean, sometimes drivers look at that as a bit of an invasion of privacy. Yes, it's in your shipment, but people, I just ask you to look at how would you feel if someone was tracking you and you didn't know about it. But again, it shouldn't be necessary. To be brutally honest, we've seen some incidents where there's not been full disclosure and open and honest dialogue between drivers and military families. So I get it why people would want to do that, but they have the right, and I don't think anybody is going to say anything negative to them about it.
Is there any discussion happening that, like, in the future, having it as a requirement to have some sort of tracking something on shipments from the industry side?
The only thing is we'll be glad to do whatever the requirement is, as long as we can cost it appropriately. And again, be careful, government, what you ask for, because there's going to be a fee associated with it. We're already moving 2.3, 2.4, whatever the number is, $1 billion worth of transportation costs in the household goods program for DoD. Do we want to throw another 100 million on top of it? 50. I don't know. There are some organizations that do tracking on their vehicles, some type of global positioning tracking of vehicles. So some of the larger entities have that capability. I think now with phones, it's not nearly as necessary with cell phones. But I mean, it's been talked about. It's been talked about for years and years. DoD has just not pulled the trigger and said, let's make it a requirement. If they do, they know they're going to incur some costs.
Yeah, I think what you have are and not that people who don't do it aren't excellent, but you have small centers of excellence, right? Where people have said, oh, I have this capability and I'll make that available to my customers, as Chuck said, GPS tracking of a truck or things like that. And those things have to fit the right kind of move too, right? Not every move would necessarily make sense on that. It's not my truck necessarily, or, those types of things. But in terms of tags, we had one of our larger companies do some back of the napkin, hey, if this was a requirement, what would that mean for me in terms of purchasing the tags, hiring people to manage, the location of those tags, recovering the tags? Can I recover the tags on the other end? If I did, how do I utilize those again? All those kind of things. And, and that was, again, a fairly large mover, but they said, hey, that's $1 million investment for us. So, it's not insignificant when you go across the entire network. And of all the shipments that are going out there, 300,000, 320,000, 350,000 shipments, and you're tracking all of that. That's a significant capability and requirement. But as Chuck said, if somebody wants to make it a requirement, you just have to be prepared for, there's a logistics tail associated with it. It's not just as easy as you think about, right, for your own self, like, oh, I throw that tag in a box, I can track it, I can pull it. Why can't the mover do it? There's much more of a logistics tail with that, and recovering it and purchasing it and tracking it and all those kind of things. But if that's where people want to go, and there are agents who offer to TSPs, not just on the military side, but on the on all markets in the moving world, that will say, hey, I have a cost. If you want to put a satellite tag on your shipment, I have a cost here that we'll charge to you to do that, mover, if you want to purchase that on behalf of your customer to do it. So So, little by little, people are kind of eking into that market and looking at how it can be done and what are the ways to do it. And I think as those tags get cheaper, as they get more, kind of ubiquitous, as the tracking gets good on it and all those kind of things, then little by little, as it becomes more available and less expensive, then it probably does become something that you'll see more and more of.
Hey, Dan, looks like we've got a comment from one of our members, one of the industry folks, a guy who's on our executive committee, Chris Lance with Beacons. And Chris asked, who's going to pay for it? I mean, that's obviously the ultimate question in our industry. Be glad to do a lot of things, but just like any business, with greater service comes a higher price point.
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of families are moving this summer. No secret to that. What are some things that families can do to prepare for their move happening?
Follow Megan Harless and all of the suggestions that she has on PCS and Like a Pro. I mean, Megan and I follow each other on Facebook. I saw she had a little yard sale last week to get rid of some of her excess goodies, put a few pennies in her pocket and lowered her weight on her shipment. So God bless you, Megan. But don't sell everything. We get paid by the weight. I keep trying to tell you that. But that's one of the things. Pare down what you may not need. Be lean and mean. I think that's probably one of the smart things to do. But just to be prepared. I mean, so many times we hear about issues that we as an industry have, and many times I get it. We are an industry that's not perfect. We try to be, but we're not perfect. But there are so many customers likewise that are not perfect and are not prepared for the move, haven't organized appropriately, haven't cleaned appropriately in their homes, and aren't really ready for the impact of people coming in. If you've done it before, you understand it. If you haven't done it before, oh my goodness, it's a whirlwind. When 3 or 4 people come into your house and start packing and they're moving, and they've got to get this job finished in a day or two. Man, I mean, these are folks that are professionals. They know what to do every day. They're not sitting around going, what should I put in this box? I mean, they're moving, and it's a whirlwind. And the more organized that you are and prepared for these individuals to come into your home, then I think the smoother the process will go. And
I think understanding the rules, right? I mean,
great.
Understanding the DoD rules in terms of the ones that impact you as a customer, at least, things that are important to you, that you understand and what the requirement is from the mover side and from your side, and therefore what you can expect and not expect, right? And so you're not asking for things that you don't expect, and you're not frustrated over things that you could have the movers had done for you, but you weren't aware that was really an entitlement. And then I think PCS 9 or 10 times myself, and I was pretty laissez-faire. My hands were kind of off, and if I could not be around, I was not around. But
you hider.
And every spouse is screaming at you profanities through their phone and laptop right now.
Just telling you the truth.
How much everything always gets put on to the spouse when we PCS, and when we hear, a lot of times our service members are working or clearing or doing something right up to the very last day, depending on their job position. And sometimes it takes a really bad move for them to realize, like, oh, I do need to be home. I do need to be a part of it, which was one of our experiences. So now my husband makes sure that those days are blocked off and he is here when stuff is happening, where Dan tries to.
He's a good man.
We'll we'll find Dan at the golf course. We'll just go.
You wouldn't find me at the golf course. I would be at work, but.
Yeah, extra hours that day.
I just want to hug your wife right now and tell her I'm so sorry for what you put her through.
No, but
Well,
I
it's
think
in.
if you meet that crew at the door, if you find out who's the crew chief, right, who's leading that crew, so you direct your answers in that direction, as opposed to, hey, I'm a packer and I'm good at packing this box, but what's the rule on the DoD side? Hey, I got a crew chief, right? I think I hear see stories every year where people are like, well, I asked this person and they had no idea. Okay, find the person who does, right? And if you can't find that person in anybody in the crew, then you have a contact, your single point of contact you need to be contacted. You have the transportation office, you have the quality assurance officer, all those people in your resources to try and make sure that you're getting what you need and you understand it. And so I think that's kind of important too, to establish that relationship with who's the right person. If you have questions or concerns or want to make sure that you're, this room right here, I got tape across it. Don't move anything in this room, talk to the right people on those kind of things and make sure.
I think Dan is spot on with this.
Mhm.
Take, and we can be, some of us, as bad as, unfortunately, we want to get in and get this done. Make sure you're getting with that crew chief. Make sure he's introducing everybody to you that's in your home and understanding what role that they play. And take 5 or 10 minutes and walk them around your home. The thing that was most important to me when I was in the industry, what's important to the family that I'm moving? And I want to identify those items, because no matter what, no matter how well I think I've done at this point, if I don't handle the items that are of importance, most important to this member and or their family, then I've not done a good job. And so I've got to identify those areas, those things that are most important. I need to have them understand the lay of the land within my home. The good movers, there's one of them on your, we've got now drivers that are on in the chat with us. Steve Miser is a great driver in the industry. And Steve will be that kind of guy that meets you at the door, says hello, introduces his people, walks around the home with you, and identifies those items that are most important to you. And then he's going to take that extra bit of care for those items. I think all of that relationship building and having them understand what's important to you are critical to the success of the move.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You talk about, walking people around, and that's when I always tell families, have the game plan for how you want your home packed as well. Because for me, I always request my kids' rooms get packed first, because I need them to stop adding things to the car pile. We can only fit so many stuffed animals and so many books and so many Lego sets into my vehicle. And so I always say, please pack my kids' rooms first, so that way they can't keep shoving things into the suitcase that needs to go into the car. And I always request that my kitchen gets packed last, because I like cooking up until the last minute. I hate that we have 2 to 3 weeks of eating out every meal. And so I always try to cook up until the very end. And so I always request that my kitchen be one of the last things that's packed. So having some sort of game plan like that of how you want things done. And then a question here from Julie, which I think we've answered some of your questions, Julie, about what makes it easier for movers, how to prepare like items near each other, and organization suggestions. But I think having the like items together does make it easier, because we usually take things off the wall, and all of our picture frames, all the wall hanging things we usually have in a corner. So that way all the picture stuff is packed together. It's not one thing here, 2 things there, 3 things there kind of deal, but it's all organized together. And I would also say with that, have your room, have your house, it doesn't have to be spotless, but tidy, clean in a way. Have all of the books on the bookshelf or near the bookshelf. Don't be one of those people that just empties your laundry onto your couch and you've got 12 loads sitting there. Fold it, put it away, put it in the room it belongs in, so that way you can be appropriately packed with that. But we're going to do an episode talking about all of the moving tips, tricks, hacks, things you should know, coming up in a couple of weeks. So we're going to go more in depth with that. So with this summer and with every year, we know many families decide to do a PPM, formerly known as the Diddy, every year to move themselves. And every year we hear some horror stories about rogue movers popping up and happening. So what are some things that families can do to protect themselves from these predator type companies? And is there anyone that they can reach out to for assistance if they find themselves in that household goods hostage situation?
Yeah, Dan, solve that problem for everybody, would you?
Okay.
Please?
We're just throwing Dan under the bus. I feel like with every question today, that just
Again, something I'll say right at the outset, and there are people that I've dealt with who correct me when I use the term rogue mover. They say, no, those are criminals. Those aren't movers, right? Those are criminals. Those a lot of what you're talking about with hostage situations and people taking advantage of you, that's criminal activity in a lot of respects. So not movers. And you start with the federal government, with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration. And they have a Protect Your Move website that gives you some ideas of things that you should be looking for and ways that you can check the mover that's moving or that you're going to move your stuff. So to make sure that they're licensed and make sure that they are following the proper regulations and things like that. There are certain state associations, movers that are moving associations that are really good and active. If you're in one of those states, you can use them as a resource as well, probably on their website. Some of them have pamphlets out on protecting your move that are, very well done, interesting. Who's your mover? Who's it going to be? Can you look them up on the internet beyond just the website that you got? Do they have a place of business? Do they have a physical address? Is there a warehouse there? Can you go visit their warehouse? Could you ask them, hey, I want to see you, I want to see where you guys operate. Can I come and look? Do they even have a place that exists like that? Or is it a company that's advertised a really low price online? They don't have a lot of information out there on themselves. And what they're going to do is take your move and sell it to somebody else, right? Broker it along to somebody else and then wash their hands of it. And then, do you get all other kind of requirements at that time? Is somebody asking you for a lot of money up front before they even come to your house and do any of your moves? Are people giving you you were talking about your survey and people coming out to survey your stuff. Is this company doing a virtual or an in-person pre-move survey and trying to see exactly what it is they're going to be moving? So there's a lot of requirements out there. You should probably get 2 or 3 or 4 quotes, compare those, and the cheapest one you might want to have, it might not be the one that you want. You got to start researching that company to make sure that they're valid. But when you run into problems, again, you're outside the DoD system at that point. And somebody has said in the past, and again, I just parrot this, that you might not feel like it, but the DoD customer in the moving process is the most protected moving customer in the world. So once you're outside of that system and you're going personally procured move, you have left the friendly confines of all those rules and regulations and personal property shipping offices and qualified DoD movers, and now you're on your own. So those are things that are problematic at that point. Where do you go? Chuck, where do you go when you run into that situation?
Well, there's a couple different things. One of the places you can go is our website. You can see if they are a member of our association. But we also have entities in our directory that are outside of our membership that have had some vetting as well. But our website is www.iammovers.org. And then our directory is called Mobility Exchange. And there's a link to it off of our website. And you can put the name of anybody into there, and you can find out if they're one of our over 2,000 members of the International Association of Movers, whether they are what we call a validated member that shows that all of the things that they purport themselves to be has been vetted, has been checked, and whether it has a check next to it or not to say, yes, they are a Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration approved household good mover. They do have insurance and liability coverage, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one of the places that you can go to vet. But again, the internet is the wild, wild west. And it's just not enough to say, man, that website's pretty, because the criminals are out there, And that's what they are good at, making a pretty website. It's very interesting. Just recently, we have found out that the FBI has gotten involved in taking a look at these kinds of companies. This is organized crime, and they are out to get you. And if you go into this blindly without doing some checking, and again, come to IAM and check. And we know a lot of movers around the world here. We can help you with that. And so call Dan. and I think we can help you. I really do. So
I mean, Samantha asked a question, right? So, but if we're forced to do it, how do we protect ourselves? And I guess I would just go back to some of the things I said, and I'll slow down a little bit because sometimes I talk fast. But I would start with FMCSA and see that they're licensed, mover. That doesn't mean
real quickly, Dan. FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, is the arm of the federal government that vets and licenses interstate movers. So if you've got an interstate move, that's the first place to check. They are an arm of a subsidiary of a component of the Department of Transportation. And so that's the first place to start. That doesn't mean that they're the greatest and the world beaters, but if they're not there, then run away, because they are not a licensed and insured entity.
Yeah. And we've got that link dropped into the comments, so you guys can easily go click on it and reference it and see what all is there for you.
Yep. Start looking around there. And again, talk to the person that you found on the internet, if that's the direction you went. But you can also probably talk to some other people who've had recent moves and find a reference, find a reference from somebody, look at online reviews of companies and see what you see about them and go deep on those, frankly, because, some of that can be, how many reviews are you talking about? But, people said last year, like, oh, I couldn't get a move. Nobody in the DOD could pick me up. They said it was, 2 months before they could get a crew out there and all that kind of stuff. And I went online and I found somebody right away. Well, that might be problematic. If you can go online and find somebody when everybody else can't find a move for any reason, and you find somebody who's got this great advertisement out there and they're ready to move you right now and they can do it whenever. So you could ask them, are you going to move my stuff or are you going to sell my move to somebody else? If do you have a physical location? Do you have a physical address? Can I look that up online? Can I Google map it and see that there's a warehouse there, or there's an actual what's there? There's a physical address. You can ask them about valuation. How much of how are they financially responsible for your shipment if something were to go wrong? What's the valuation? What insurance? Chuck mentioned insurance. Do they have? You can ask them about their general liability, their workers' comp insurance, their warehouse and cargo coverage insurance. What is that? Can they show you that they have some of those kind of things? So just things to try and validate that they're a legitimate business and that they're going to do your move. Again, not that you can't have somebody broker your move and pass it along to somebody else, but if you want to be ultra sure, maybe you want to use somebody who has the assets and they're the people who are going to physically do your move. And again, in the middle of the peak season, if they have all kinds of time and can accommodate anything that you want move, you got to dig a little deeper probably to make sure that it's legitimate.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you were saying all of those, I was typing them out and I dropped that into the comments as well. So if you didn't catch everything that Dan rattled off, hopefully that list right there gives you a little bit of help. And then I'm also grabbing the link to our Google Drive, the Google Drive that I have of just free resources. In there is a PPM planning worksheet that helps you figure out what your incentive pay is, getting quotes from multiple companies, how the taxes work on your incentive pay, all of that. And there's also a budget planning worksheet in there as well. So just something to kind of help you plan through your move if you find yourself having to do a PPM in some way.
Megan, if you want, yeah. I have a Maryland Movers put out a nice brochure on protecting your move. And if you want that, you can put that in your Google Drive as well. And it kind of goes through some of the stuff that I was just talking about that people could look at it. And yes, it's Maryland Movers, but most of it applies, anywhere you might be looking for a move.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you can send that to me, Dan, I'll get that document added to the Google Drive so you guys can be able to easily reference that. So for some good, helpful information as well. So wrapping up today, is there anything that we did not, I know we covered a ton of different things today. Is there anything that we have not covered that y'all want to make sure families know about for preparing for the peak season that we are 3 days into now?
Yeah, it seems like it's become an expanded peak season. For a while, when I first got in the business in 1994, peak season was, end of April till September. And then it shortened to last week of May till right before the 4th of July. And now it's going back to the paradigm that I started with. It's a longer season, because not as many shipments are able to be handled each week like we did previously. And so it is a bit extended. I mean, I think we've talked about some of the things, being flexible, do your planning, understand that unfortunately change can be a part of the process. And we're still going through a pandemic. We're still in a pandemic, and that has, all of the things that you know about and hear about, labor issues, cost issues, inflation, there's just so many variables going on. Understand that going in, and have that flexibility, work with your mover. 90% of the moves are going to go extremely well. Unfortunately, we hear about the ones that go sideways. But for the most part, I think professional movers are going to do their very, very best to come in and handle your move in a professional, appropriate way.
I think that's a good reminder for our groups too. I always see in our groups, a lot of people say, this group has scared me. All I hear and see all the bad things. Understand that in our Facebook and other social media groups geared and related towards PCSing, people usually come there when they have an issue and they need help trying to resolve that issue or work through whatever the process may be. So don't just assume that's how every move goes, because good moves do happen. We usually just don't hear about them because people come to the groups looking for advice on how to navigate and work through something.
Megan, if I could touch on one last thing. I know we're up against the clock, and that has to do with the new way that U.S. Transportation Command is doing their customer satisfaction survey calculations, or gathering that information. The customer satisfaction survey, which measures our performance, the mover's performance, is a critical element. And if you want to have an impact on how well moves go and how the future of moving goes, fill out your form. It is not in DPS. Starting April 29th and beyond, it is not in DPS any longer. So if you've done that before in DPS, not happening. DOD has hired a contractor. The contractor will be sending you information a couple of times during the move, once after pickup, and then another a month after delivery. And it will be sent to you via text or email. And that's the only way you can complete those forms. You cannot do it in DPS. You can't contact the help desk, which many have done in the past. Starting with pickups from 29 April on, that's the only way to complete your customer satisfaction survey. And I would encourage you to please do that and look for those messages coming your way.
So because of that, your email and your phone numbers have to be updated in DPS, because that's where it's going. You have to have that information updated.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's a great reminder. And it's something that now everyone, you're hearing it from the industry side as well as me, is that survey does impact the program and how companies are awarded shipments, what drives business rule changes that the program changes every year that impact us as well. It all comes from that survey. They do get looked at. It's not just a check the block kind of item. So it is really important that you do take the few minutes and go through the process of filling it out and giving your feedback onto what your experience was, whether it was really great, really bad, somewhere in between. They do get looked at, the comments do get read, and they do directly impact the program and the changes made to the program.
Yep. The cream rises to the top, and the only way that that happens is through your comments. And so you want better movers in the program, fill out the survey.
Absolutely.
And
Anything that you want to go ahead, Dan?
I would just say you got to fill out both of them. You're going to get 2 surveys now, not 1. And you got to fill out the first survey, and then after pickup, and you got to fill out the second one. And if you don't, then that survey doesn't count. No matter what you put in there, it doesn't count against the score to the mover. So you got to fill out the first one, and then you got to fill out the second one. I think they're quick and easy. They're 3 questions each, and boom, boom, boom. But if you don't do them both, then it doesn't get racked and stacked with the rest of them. And no, I know we're late, and I don't have anything additional beyond that. Okay. But appreciate the opportunity to join and talk here.
No, absolutely. We appreciate you guys giving us your time during what we know is going to be a busy time, busy season. Be able to come here and talk with us about what it is that families need to know. So thank you for your time. Thank you for joining us. Everybody watching, thank you for joining us as well. Don't forget to join us again next week. We'll be back at our regular time next week, Wednesday at 10 a.m. Central, 11 Eastern, for another great show. And as we go through the PCS season, we're going to have some more folks on talking about what it is that you need to know for the process. And with me moving as well, my family relocating this summer, you'll begin to see some of our experience in person and up close on the page as well. So be sure to stick around for all of that. So until then, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday, enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you next Wednesday.